Stolen Fate, Stolen Love, Her Rebirth Chap 1. At dawn, lying on the earthen bed, she frowned, her sleep unsettled and restless. "Doctor, can you not let my daughter take the medicine?" Evan Brooks, her biological father, called from the doorway, his voice thick with sorrow he could hardly suppress. "Every time she takes it, she suffers so badly. I really can't bear to see her in pain." "Yes, doctor." Her stepmother, Sharon Mitchell, spoke too, her words choked with grief. "She's just too difficult to endure it. We only hope she finds release sooner rather than later." "But I see, you don't actually care about her finding release early," came the sharp, mocking voice of her second aunt, Betty Thompson. Her tone carried to every corner of the sickroom, deliberately loud. "Don't pretend in front of me. Everyone knows you only wish Senna Brooks would die quickly so you could inherit her fortune." "What's that?" Still not satisfied, yet already thinking of the family money? The second aunt's anger flared. "This fortune was built by Senna herself. Even if it's all gone, it's none of your business to grieve here." "Betty, you're deliberately sowing discord. This is your own idea." Sharon's usually gentle voice suddenly sharpened, her smile cold as ice. "Even if Senna truly wished to divide her inheritance, it would have nothing to do with you." Betty laughed coldly. "Nothing to do with me? I raised her for 20 years. If it weren't for my Ivy, she would have been married off to the Carters long ago. Would Senna even have had the peaceful days with the Bennets? Long ago, your wicked hearts would have sold her out piece by piece. You guard her every day, only to control her. You think by controlling Senna, you can monopolize her fortune? Shameless!" Sharon's anger flared as she shouted. "You really have the audacity to twist truth into lies. Ivy Brooks replacing Senna Brooks to take the blame? Clearly, she valued the Carters' money while Senna's own fate was being stolen, her misfortunes caused by none other than you. And you dare think she'd help you? Let me tell you, there's not a single chance." Betty refused to back down, a sharp laugh escaping her lips. "Huh. How laughable. If you want to see who's twisting the truth, just step outside and ask anyone in Donclav County. Everyone knows the treacherous heart you, Sharon, have carried all these years. You didn't even care for her a single day. Back then, Senna's achievements were truly remarkable. During the college exams, she ate the meals you prepared, only to fall violently ill with diarrhea. If she hadn't been so strong, your cruel schemes would have ruined her entire life. You dare speak with blood on your tongue. You shameless wretch." Senna found herself oddly interested in the squabbles beyond the door, her mind drifting back to countless trivial memories from the past. Suddenly, a voice, weary yet resolutely commanding like that of a stern master, rang out, "All of you, get out. I won't let you interfere with her medicine, not for a single day." Before her eyes, the scene shifted. An elderly woman with silver hair, her expression sorrowful and pitiful, approached her. "Senna, you mustn't abandon the old lady." "Mother." Senna abruptly awoke, realizing beneath her was the hard earthen bed. Her eyes fell on the greenish, mud-stained tiles forming the vaulted ceiling above. Slowly, she sat up. Opposite the bed stood a roughly 9/10 complete sewing machine. Against the wall was a plum-colored multi-compartment shelf, carrying a faint earthy scent, furniture from the late 80s to early 90s, modest and simple. She picked up a mirror within reach. In its reflection, a young lady stared back. Radiant, determined skin, lustrous dark hair cascading down her back, and a pair of bright, expressive eyes that seemed to hold both mischief and clarity. For the third time, she confirmed it, lying on the sickbed and closing her eyes, she had returned, back to her 20-year-old self. "Senna, Ivy, wake up already." The voice of an old woman came from outside the window. "The sun is about to shine on your backsides. Both of you are already at the age to get married, yet you're still this lazy. When you go to your husband's house later, be careful or they'll teach you a lesson." Senna lifted the curtain. Old Madam Brooks was sitting in front of the mirror, combing her hair. The red plastic comb slid through her sparse hair, pulling out a few strands. Out of habit, she gathered the fallen hairs and flicked them to the ground, then glared at the middle-aged woman sweeping the yard. "Betty, are you sweeping the yard or cultivating immortality? Move faster. The Bennett family will arrive a little after 10. We have a lot to do today." That's right. In her previous life, it was on this very day that she and Leo Bennett had their successful arranged meeting. Not long after, she married into the Bennett family. In her previous life, she truly did succeed, and it even became the thing the old woman was most proud of. After all, who could have imagined that Leo Bennett, deep in debt back then, would one day become the richest man in the entire Eastern Province? The most astonishing part of all was this, that saying, "A man changes once he has money," never seemed to apply to Leo. In all the years that followed, he loved Senna with the same devotion, the same tenderness, as if every day were the first day he fell for her. Even though Senna never bore him a child, not once in his life did he ever entertain the thought of marrying another woman. Her mother-in-law, too, was praised by everyone as a woman of understanding and kindness, treating her like her very own daughter. People always said that in her previous life she must have accumulated great virtue, and that was why she had such blessings, such blessings. Every time she heard those words, Senna only felt like laughing. How could they possibly know that all that so-called deep affection and understanding were nothing more than a way to coax her into working herself to the bone for the Bennett family's company? Leo was gentle and considerate, but that gentleness was never meant for her alone. Whether it was a stray dog or a wandering cat, as long as it appeared in front of him with pitiful eyes, he would soften instantly. And if it were a woman battered by fate, someone whose circumstances were miserable, then he felt even more compelled to protect her with care and tenderness. Meanwhile, she, his wife, gradually lost the right to his warmth and affection simply because. "You're the strongest. You're the most capable. They're not like you." By the time she lay on the hospital bed, struggling even to breathe, her so-called understanding mother-in-law walked in holding the hands of 2 children. Her face was filled with sorrow and shame as she stood before Senna's bedside. "Senna, don't blame Mother," she said softly. "Our family cannot be left without an heir. The Bennett business is so vast, and you were the one who helped build it from the ground up. There must be someone to inherit it, isn't that right? Rest assured, these 2 children are your children too. After you pass, I will make sure they mourn you properly." Leo, as always, wore that same expression of deep affection tinged with guilt. "I'm sorry, Senna, they forced me. Mother is old and longs for a grandchild. And besides, the children are innocent. The one I've loved most, from beginning to end, is still you. Even after you're gone, no one will ever take your place as Mrs. Bennett." If she could have spoken, she would have cursed him on the spot. Get lost. "Who told you I ever wanted that stupid title?" Unfortunately, she could no longer form words. But thankfully, she still had her lawyer. Senna recalled a moment. After the lawyer had finished reading her will, the entire room had erupted into utter panic. Even her mother-in-law had fainted on the spot. Senna couldn't help but feel a surge of joy at the sight. They had surely forgotten that the wealth of the Bennett family was hers. She had built it step by step with her own hands. The company existed merely under the Bennett name. If they had pretended all their lives, shouldn't she make it real this time? After she passed away, they deserved to weep and wail until they were utterly helpless. But as she imagined it, their mourning seemed almost cruel. They wouldn't even send her gently to the afterlife. Instead, they would return her to the very beginning. "Mother, the Bennett family is coming today to meet Senna. Isn't her father coming back?" Betty's words snapped Senna back to full awareness. She had the chance to return to the starting point. No one could repeat the same path as before. Old Madam Brooks said. "The leadership is inspecting Doncloud County these past 2 days. There's no need to rush. Such a small matter doesn't require him." Betty muttered under her breath, "A daughter's whole life is a small matter?" The old lady snapped back, "Why do you keep bringing that up?" "Nothing at all," Betty teased, her voice light and playful. "Today is the day Senna is meeting her match, yet neither of her parents are here. Don't let the Bennett family arrive and mistake the person there's meeting is our family, Ivy." Ivy Brooks was Senna's younger cousin, just a few months her junior. Ever since they were little, the second aunt always seemed to take a perverse pleasure in giving Ivy more than her. She treated Senna as if she were unloved by her father, unwanted by her mother, and somehow unworthy of having a life better than Ivy's. This naturally led Ivy to covet everything Senna had. Anything Senna possessed that was good, Ivy had to snatch it from her hands before she could feel content. In her previous life, Senna had always wondered why Ivy stared at her so intently, as if coveting everything she had. Only later did she realize that Ivy treated her like the protagonist of a story. Anything that belonged to Senna was, in Ivy's eyes, inherently precious. Senna caught the subtle meaning behind Betty's words and narrowed her eyes. It seemed that in this life, nothing would be different. Old Madam Brooks, however, didn't pick up on the nuance. Still fuming, she spat sharply. Your mouth dribbles nonsense. Everything with Ivy has already been arranged with the Carters. What do you think you're doing? With that final word, her voice rose, fierce and unmistakably blazing. The old madam's anger is naturally due to a reason. Now the Carter family and Ivy are engaged. Originally they were engaged to Senna. The Carter family came from the city, well-established and influential. Everyone in the family held important positions, and their conditions were exceptionally good. The only problem was Lucien Carter. He had been paralyzed from an injury, and it was said that the damage was permanent. He could never have children, a serious issue, which was why he returned to the village to find a wife. As it happened, when Senna's father, Evan Brooks, was still hesitating, Ivy dashed ahead to the Carter family. She announced that Senna already had a suitor and was ready to marry. The Carters immediately interpreted this as Senna being an obstacle to poor, paralyzed Lucien, as if she were deliberately humiliating him. So they switched their proposal to Ivy, while also insisting on attending Senna's wedding, effectively forcing Senna to marry within 2 months. Because of Ivy's scheming, during this period Senna was constantly pushed into matchmakings. The countless minor incidents, the broken apples, the stolen treats, and other petty inconveniences, were all made to look like Senna was at fault. It drove old Madam Brooks nearly to the brink of fury. Perhaps thinking of the troublemakers in her household, old Madam Brooks called out loudly toward the east room, Ivy Brooks. Get up this instant. How dare you be so lazy? Turning toward the west room, her tone softened slightly. Senna, you too, wake up and fix your hair. Make sure you dress beautifully today. Senna quickly folded her blanket and stepped outside, only to run straight into Ivy emerging from the east room. Truthfully, Ivy's appearance was nothing short of stunning. Her skin was flawless and pale, her eyes bright as jade, and her nose delicate. She was the kind of girl whose face could be a first-love goddess. But her movements were always graceful and soft, especially when she pouted or acted coquettishly. It reminded Senna of those over-the-top drama scenes from high school live streams, where girls would pinch their cheeks and coo at the lead male, making him want to both scold and reward them. Apparently, such antics were a secret skill that captivated men endlessly. Ivy glanced at Senna, a perfect smile blooming on her lips, yet in the depths of her eyes lay a subtle, superior gleam. Sister, good morning. Good morning, my foot. Old Madam Brooks barked, the sun is already high. Who is as lazy as you, sleeping until the sun rises? In your husband's house, they'll beat you to death for this. Ivy froze, embarrassed, instinctively reaching to touch her hair to hide it. But in the fumbling, she didn't even manage to grasp it properly, which only earned her another sharp scolding from old Madam Brooks. What on earth are you doing now? You fell, tumbled, and still look dizzy. Have you recovered yet? It turned out Ivy had wrapped her hair in circles around a fur ribbon on the table, a tiny hairstyling trick from later times. Unfamiliar with such clever little techniques, old Madam Brooks assumed she was up to mischief again. Catching Senna's mocking glance, Ivy took a deep breath, deciding not to argue with the old lady. She asked instead, politely, Grandma, shall we buy some fish? I heard Leo Bennett especially likes fish. No need, old Madam Brooks replied briskly, that's greasy and troublesome. Doesn't he have enough with the braised pork? Ivy pouted slightly. Oh dear, how can you host guests without preparing what they like to eat? Old Madam Brooks retorted, do you know that the guest listens to the host? He isn't even officially part of our family yet. Hearing this, Senna narrowed her eyes suspiciously and whispered, "How on earth do you know he likes fish?" In her previous life, who didn't know? Not only did they know, but every time Leo visited, the house would prepare at least 2 whole fish for him, afraid that he wouldn't enjoy his meal. Ivy cast a sidelong glance at Senna and casually said, "I heard from others that back in high school, Leo was quite the star, everyone knew his preferences." Thinking of today's plan, Senna didn't bother lingering with old Madam Brooks. She turned directly to her mother and said, "Mom, lend me some money. I'm going to buy fish." Betty, knowing that today's matter was crucial for her daughter's entire life, didn't hesitate. She immediately went into the room, grabbed some money, and said, "Besides fish, see what else he likes to eat, and buy it all together." Then she turned to old Madam Brooks, who was still glaring at her, and smiled warmly, "Mom, isn't Ivy doing this for Senna's sake? Leo is someone from the big city, his future matters." Old Madam Brooks didn't doubt it. After all, this whole situation was the second aunt's scheme with Ivy's marriage in mind, trying to trick Senna. It seemed even they felt a little guilty deep down. Betty smiled and said, "I hear he's returned from the south this time. Back home, his mother has recovered from her illness, and all debts have been cleared. He's even planning to open his own factory, and soon, you'll have a grandson-in-law who's a factory owner." Upon hearing this, old Madam Brooks finally let a smile break across her face. Of course, she hoped her granddaughter would marry well. If it weren't for Senna suddenly falling ill with diarrhea during the college entrance exams this year, she would already be a student, and her appearance was beyond words. So stunning that no one in the surrounding villages could match her beauty. Originally, she had planned to wait for the steel mill exam in the county and then find a husband among the factory workers. It seemed the perfect match. But suddenly, the Carter family had to intervene with a proposal, throwing the 2 young women's marriage plans into chaos. Now Ivy had to marry a disabled man, practically like being a widow while her husband was still alive, and Senna, anxious and flustered, was desperate to be married within 2 months. In order for Senna to choose a good husband's family, the old lady was anxious during this time. Fortunately Leo Bennett appeared. "Still our Senna is truly lucky," old Madam Brooks laughed heartily. "I thought this time our Senna would have to endure grievances, but I didn't expect that the Bennett family would come all the way from the county to ask around. They're no worse than the workers." Just as Ivy finished fixing her hair and stepped out of the room, she caught the remark and curled her lips in scorn. "Lucky? Hardly, just the spotlight on the protagonist. In this life, she let them see who had the real good luck." Betty, too, felt a twinge of displeasure. Old Madam's words implied that Senna was worthy of Leo, but since her own motives weren't exposed, she could only smile along, saying, "That's right, he grew up handsome, and has the ability, although the family is a little poor, but in the future, he will definitely be well off. Today, I cannot simply watch him, I must see his mother and sister properly too. Later, if they dare cross me, I'll make them pay." Old Madam Brooks's voice trembled with surprise. You actually have a bit of the mother-in-law's air today." Betty's eyes twinkled as she smiled slyly. "Look at you. Senna has been raised in our house since she was little, like our very own cherished daughter. So I can't be more qualified to be a mother-in-law than her stepmother Sharon?" Mentioning Evan's second wife, Sharon, made old Madam Brooks finally relax a little, approving of the second branch's daughter-in-law. She added, "Exactly. Today, let this mother-in-law see for herself. Give our Senna a good defense." Senna carried the wash basin to the kitchen to get water, couldn't help but laugh. Her grandmother was usually a person of indecisiveness. She was afraid that it was impossible to imagine Betty was truly wanting to be Leo's mother-in-law. But one thing was certain, a few days ago, when she and Ivy had collided and tumbled to the ground, it wasn't just her who had been reborn, so had Ivy. In the past life, at this very moment, Ivy's mind had been entirely set on marrying into the Carter family and enjoying a comfortable life. Leo had been nothing but an obstacle. But now, Ivy was actively playing her part in the scheme. In her past life, she had failed miserably as the proud general's wife, but in this life, she intended to craft herself into a refined lady of a prestigious household. Just that the 2 of them reincarnated this time was a bit unlucky. in before they reincarnated back, Ivy had snatched the Carter marriage right out of Senna's hands, finalizing arrangements with the elders of the Carter family. And now, Ivy wanted to marry Leo. Senna felt a flicker of curiosity. How on earth was Ivy planning to navigate all of this?